Hi, Merry Christmas and early Happy New Year. It's been a really long year. It's been full of blessings, but also full of a lot of trials that the Lord has allowed. And we're promised that. We're promised that for our growth. But it got me thinking going into the new year, how does a believer, or how should a believer, prepare for trials that are coming his way? Because we're promised they're going to come. And how do they deal with them in the moment as well? And it's something that I've struggled with in the past a lot. Throughout college, I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression. I still do, but I know how to fight now. And it was something that I continually kept praying to the Lord. Lord, I want to be steady. Just make me steady. I wasn't worried about the trials that were going to come. I just wanted to be able to make sure that I was going to be able to handle them. And that's a big ask, because sometimes we're overwhelmed with sorrow, we're overwhelmed with anxiety, and the fact is we need the Lord's grace and we need to lean on the Lord. We're flesh, we're not able to always handle things. And so in considering this question of how should a believer handle those things, we also have to look at what is our flesh tempted to do. Our flesh is tempted to worry. Our flesh is tempted to fear and anxiety. And what if this happens? What if? And we take our eyes off of Christ. And so in that, there is a scripture in 1 Peter, actually several places in 1 Peter, that has a term that I've always really loved and has helped me tremendously. And that term is sober-minded. If you don't know what sober-minded means, it goes beyond just not being drunk, not being on drugs, or anything like that. It goes into anything that hinders your ability to think and process things clearly or in the proper light. So when we're worried and when we're anxious, we're not able to process things rightly. And that goes into some physical things too. So that's sleep, that's drinking enough water, eating enough food, and then that goes into disciplines, spiritual disciplines, being in the Word, being in prayer, being in community. Why community? Because it reminds us of the grace of God. It reminds us of the goodness of God. Prayer, because we're bringing our petitions to the Lord and saying, Lord, I can't handle this. I don't know what to do. Please help me. And then Scripture, because it reminds us of the truth. There's a common phrase where pastors will say, hey, you need to stop listening to yourself. You need to start preaching to yourself. Well, what do you preach to yourself? Well, not motivational speeches or anything like that. You preach to yourself the Word. And so we're going to get into the Word a little bit in 1 Peter, and we're going to be looking for the places in 1 Peter that mention that sober-mindedness and see how they help us in different scenarios. So in 1 Peter, he's writing to believers that are scattered and they're being persecuted, so they have plenty of reason to be worried or anxious, and so he's trying to encourage them in that way. And in 1 Peter 1:13, he had just got done talking about a salvation that prophets were looking into. Okay, who's this going to come by, and when is it going to come? And saying that it's such an inexpressible salvation that angels long to look into it. And so he then goes on in 1 Peter 1:13 to say, therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So they're going through all these things and this persecution and everything, and he redirects their attention back to the salvation that was promised and that angels long to look to for hope. They're going through some really tough stuff this side of heaven, and yet he's redirecting their attention back to Christ and to the salvation. And so the next place where I've seen that it's mentioned, sober-mindedness that is chapter 4. He starts the chapter by actually saying, since therefore Christ suffered in the flesh, he knows what it's like, arm yourselves with the same way of thinking, for whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live for the rest of time in the flesh, no longer for human passions, but for the will of God. So he's talking about suffering well so that we can be obedient to the Lord. And then in verse 7 of chapter 4, he says, the end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. So he talks about not only being sober-minded so that we're not obsessed or worried, but he's saying so that we're able to love others in the moments that may seem overwhelming. We're suffering well by being obedient to love others. And so in chapter 5, then goes on, this is actually my favorite one, 5, 6 through 9, it says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world." And so in this context, he's using it as a way of saying, hey, your anxieties can get the best of you. They can get the better of you, and you can fall into sin while anxious. And being anxious in and of itself is sin because you're not trusting the Lord. And so he's saying, have your wits about you. Be sober-minded. Be ready to fight the fight well, because the devil is always looking for an open opportunity. And so as we go into this next year, my encouragement to you would be, if you're making resolutions, try to think through what are the small things in my life that I can do to help me be more sober-minded, so that when trials come, or even before them, my attention will always be redirected back to the Lord. That I'm not just kind of walking through life and my attention snaps back, but I am constantly trying to be watchful for those moments when I'm overwhelmed or anxious or tempted to despair, so that I can have hope, so that I can love other people, and then so that I can also be aware and watchful for my own sin. And so that's all I have for you today. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I hope it's a good one. We'll see you later.